On one freezing night in World War II, 76 prisoners crawled out of a secret tunnel under a Nazi prison camp. But this was not a normal tunnel. It was more than 7 meters underground. It was longer than a football field. It had air ventilation. It had wooden supports. It had electric lighting. And it was built by prisoners, using bedboards, milk tins, spoons, stolen wood, and pure desperation. But here is the terrifying part. Out of the 76 men who escaped, only 3 reached freedom, and 50 of them were later murdered, on Hitler's orders. This is the real story of the Great Escape, not the Hollywood version, not the simplified version, the real version. A story where hundreds of prisoners turned an escape-proof Nazi camp into the site of one of the craziest escape operations in history. And by the end of this video, you will understand why this was not just an escape. It was engineering, it was espionage, it was psychological warfare, and it was planned from inside a prison camp. The story begins at Stalag Luft III. This was a German prisoner of war camp. It was built to hold captured Allied airmen, pilots, navigators, bombers, officers. These men were not ordinary prisoners. They were trained to think under pressure. They understood maps, they understood machines, they understood timing, they understood risk, and many of them had already survived being shot down from the sky. So the Germans knew one thing: if these men were placed in a normal prison camp, they would try to escape. So the Germans built a camp that was designed to stop them. The barracks were raised above the ground. That way, guards could look underneath and spot digging. The camp was built on sandy soil. That made tunnels dangerous, because sand can collapse easily. There were watchtowers, floodlights, barbed wire, armed guards, searches, and listening devices. The Germans believed that if anyone tried to dig, the tunnel would collapse, or the guards would find it. In simple words, Stalag Luft III was not just a prison, it was a trap. But inside that trap was a man who believed the impossible could still be done. His name was Roger Bushell, and inside the camp, he was known as Big X. Roger Bushell was an officer in the Royal Air Force. He was calm, smart, focused, and extremely determined. Inside the camp, he became the leader of the escape organization. His codename was Big X. And Big X did not want a small escape. He did not want 1 man to escape. He did not want 5 men to escape. He wanted 200 men to escape. Now think about how insane that sounds. 200 men needed clothes. 200 men needed fake papers. 200 men needed maps. 200 men needed escape routes. 200 men needed food. And 200 men needed to crawl through a tunnel without making a sound. And even after leaving the camp, they would still be inside Nazi Germany. So this was not a simple prison break. This was a full military-style operation. It needed planning, it needed secrecy, it needed discipline, and it needed hundreds of prisoners working together. Big X understood something important. Even if most of the escapees were caught, the escape would still hurt Germany, because the Nazis would have to send soldiers, police, railway officers, and security forces to search for them. That meant time, money, manpower, and resources, all wasted. So the escape was not only about freedom, it was also about resistance, and the plan began with 3 strange names: Tom, Dick, and Harry. The prisoners decided to build not 1 tunnel, but 3. They called them Tom, Dick, and Harry. Why 3? Because if the Germans discovered 1 tunnel, the others might survive. It was a backup plan inside another backup plan. The tunnel that became famous was Harry. Harry's entrance was hidden under a stove, inside Hut 104. Imagine that, a secret tunnel entrance hidden under a stove inside a Nazi prison camp. Every day, prisoners had to act normal. They had to smile, walk, talk, eat, and pretend nothing was happening. But beneath them, other men were crawling underground, digging toward freedom. But digging Harry was a nightmare. The tunnel had to be deep, very deep, so they dug it more than 7 meters underground. That helped hide it from detection, but it created a deadly problem: air. A deep tunnel without air is not a tunnel. It is a grave. So the prisoners built their own ventilation system, and they built it from empty powdered milk tins. They cut the tins, bent them, joined them together, and created air pipes. Then they built a homemade air pump. This pump pushed oxygen down into the tunnel. This was not just digging, this was engineering. They needed light, so they created a lighting system. They needed wood, so they stole bedboards. They needed tools, so they made tools from anything they could find. A spoon became a shovel, a milk tin became an air duct, a bedboard became a support beam, a piece of wire became part of a compass. To the guards, the camp looked normal. But underground, the prisoners were building a secret escape machine. Here is the part most people miss. Digging the tunnel was only half the job. Getting out of the camp was step one. Surviving outside was the real challenge. Because outside the camp was Nazi Germany. There were checkpoints, police patrols, train inspections, identity checks, and suspicious civilians. If your German sounded wrong, you could be caught. If your papers looked fake, you could be caught. If your clothes looked strange, you could be caught. If you looked nervous, you could be caught. So inside the prison camp, the prisoners built a secret escape factory. There was a forgery team. They made fake identity papers. There was a tailoring team. They changed uniforms into civilian clothes. There was a map team. They created escape routes. There was a tools team. They made compasses and equipment. There was a security team. They watched the guards. And there was a sand team, because digging creates sand. A lot of sand. And the sand was dangerous. The underground sand was a different colour from the surface soil. If guards saw it, they would know someone was digging. So the prisoners came up with a strange idea. They made small bags inside their trousers. They filled the bags with tunnel sand. Then they walked around the camp and secretly released the sand onto the ground. Imagine walking past a Nazi guard while your trousers are filled with evidence. One wrong step, one strange sound, one suspicious look, and the whole plan is finished. And then disaster happened. The Germans discovered one tunnel. Tom was found. That could have ended everything, but Harry was still hidden, so the prisoners continued. They became more careful, more silent, more disciplined, and by March 1944, Harry was ready. March 24th, 1944. The night of the escape. Inside Hut 104, the selected prisoners waited. Each man had a number, each man had a route, each man had a plan. Some had fake papers, some had maps, some had food, some had civilian clothes, some planned to travel by train, some planned to walk, some hoped to reach neutral countries, and some knew they might not make it very far. But they were going anyway. The plan sounded simple. Move the stove, open the trapdoor, climb down, crawl through Harry, reach the exit, run into the trees, disappear into the night. But almost immediately, something went wrong. The tunnel was too short. Harry was supposed to come out inside the forest, but the exit was short of the tree line. That meant the men had to crawl out into open ground, close to the watchtowers, close to the guards, close to death. Now they could not move quickly. They had to wait for the perfect moment. A guard turns away. The path is clear. A signal is sent. One man crawls out. Then he runs for the trees. To control the timing, the prisoners used a rope signal system. If it was safe, the signal came. If it was dangerous, everyone froze. Now imagine being inside that tunnel. You are deep underground. The air is thin. You cannot stand. You cannot turn around. Your heart is pounding. Ahead of you is freedom. Behind you are hundreds of men waiting. Above you are armed guards. But still, one by one, they moved forward. Through the night, the escape continued. One man out, then another, then another. The timing was slow, the danger was constant, but the operation was working. Men were disappearing into the cold night. By the end, 76 prisoners had escaped through Harry. 76 men, from a camp built to stop exactly that. But then, everything changed. A guard noticed movement. The escape had been discovered. Floodlights cut through the darkness. Dogs started barking. Guards started shouting. The tunnel was found. Inside Hut 104, the prisoners who had not escaped had only seconds. They had to destroy everything. Maps were burned. Fake documents were destroyed. Evidence disappeared into flames. The Germans now knew prisoners had escaped, but they did not know how far they had gone. 76 men were outside the wire, somewhere in Nazi Germany. And now, the manhunt began. The escapees scattered in different directions. Some went toward train stations. Some moved through forests. Some tried to reach borders. Some tried to blend in as workers. But all of them were in danger, because Nazi Germany was not an easy place to disappear. There were checkpoints, railway inspections, police patrols, military searches, and civilians watching for suspicious strangers. A single mistake could expose them. A wrong answer, a nervous face, a bad accent, a missing document, even the wrong shoes could be enough. Slowly, the Germans started catching them, one by one. Some were captured within hours, some lasted days, some got incredibly far, but only 3 men reached freedom. Their names were Per Bergsland, Jens Müller, and Bram van der Stok. 3 men out of 76. The rest were captured, and for 50 of them, the worst was still coming. When Hitler heard about the escape, he was furious. The Great Escape humiliated Nazi Germany. A camp built to be escape-proof had been beaten by prisoners. Prisoners with spoons, milk tins, bedboards, fake papers, secret signals, and months of planning. Hitler ordered a brutal response. 50 of the recaptured escapees were murdered. Not during the escape, not in battle, after they had already been captured. They were taken away in small groups. Then, they were shot. The Germans tried to make it look like they had been killed while escaping again, but that was a lie. It was a war crime. This is the part of the story that is hard to forget, because the Great Escape is not only exciting, it is heartbreaking. These men were not superheroes. They were prisoners, cold, hungry, watched, trapped, but they still chose to resist. So why does this escape still feel impossible today? Because almost every part of it should have failed. The tunnel should have collapsed. The guards should have found it earlier. The sand should have exposed them. The fake documents should have failed. The air system should not have worked. The lighting should have stopped. The timing should have broken down. And hundreds of prisoners should not have been able to keep such a huge secret. But somehow, they did. They built a tunnel deep underground. They supported it with stolen bedboards. They made air ducts from milk tins. They created fake papers by hand. They turned uniforms into civilian clothes. They hid sand in their trousers. They made maps. They made tools. They created signals. They planned routes across Nazi-controlled Europe. And they did all of this while armed guards watched them every day. This was not luck. This was patience. This was discipline. This was human intelligence under extreme pressure. And it proves something powerful. Even in a place designed to remove hope, people can still create it. A tunnel is not just a hole in the ground. Sometimes, a tunnel is a message. A message that says, you can lock us up, you can surround us with fences, you can watch us from towers, but you cannot control what we are willing to risk for freedom. The Great Escape remains one of the most unbelievable escape stories of World War II. Not because it had a happy ending, it did not. Not because everyone survived, they did not. But because hundreds of trapped men worked together to do something that should have been impossible. So here is the question. If you were inside that camp and your number was called, would you enter the tunnel? Comment your answer below, and if this story gave you chills, like, share and subscribe for more unbelievable true stories from history.